We come together on this Laetare, this joyful Sunday, in somewhat unusual circumstances. Today I sit in an empty church. Today I look into a camera to talk to you. And today we hear a gospel that really speaks to our times as much as in any time in the church's history. 2,000 years ago, the disciples asked Jesus a question about the man born blind. "Rabbi, who sinned, he or his parents, that he was born blind?" Now, implied in that question is that the man's blindness is a punishment for some sin. And today, I think many might ask a very similar question. Has the world sinned so greatly that God is punishing us with coronavirus? Jesus answers, and he says, "Neither he nor his parents sinned, but so that the work of God might be made visible through him." And so I think that answer is available for both the disciples and for us today. I think that Jesus is answering us in just the same way as he did 2,000 years ago. God is not punishing us, but God is allowing us to face this pandemic just as humanity has faced and overcome so many different challenges all throughout our history. Why is God allowing this? So that the work of God might be made visible through Jesus. And so we can also ask, what is the work of God? And Jesus shows us what the work of God is as he smears clay on the blind man's eyes. The work of God is compassion. The work of God is healing. The work of God is forgiving and saving. The work of God is bringing light to overcome the darkness, whether that darkness be physical or spiritual. And Jesus says to his disciples, we have to do the work of God, the one who sent me, while it is day. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. And we know that Jesus is not alone in doing the work of God. Jesus uses the word "we" to include you and I in his mission. Even in this time of physical separation from each other, we are to carry on the work of God with acts of healing, both emotional and relational. We ought to carry on the work of God through acts of affirmation, moments of forgiving, and simply giving. In short, even from a distance, being a light in the darkness of disorder. Now, if you recall the book of Genesis, the creation story, the very first act of God was to say, "Let there be light." And God separated the light from the darkness before going on with the rest of the work of creation. Today, Jesus brings this blind man physical light. But Jesus also brings him the light of faith and the light of understanding. Now, we might want to ask why, on this occasion, Jesus spit to make mud or clay that he smeared over the man's eyes. Biblical commentators have again gone back to the creation narrative to propose that this action is akin to God taking the clay or the dirt of the earth to form the first human being. And of course, the washing in the pool of Siloam is a symbol for our own baptism, when we become a new creation. Looking more deeply into the entirety of John's Gospel, isn't it interesting that last week, in the narrative about the woman at the well, in speaking with him, the Samaritan woman comes to believe in Jesus. She then expresses that belief to the people of her village, and these Samaritans, who were enemies with the Jews, express their own belief, and they invite him to stay on with them for 2 more days. Today, when the blind man was healed, He expresses his faith in Jesus. The Pharisees, on the other hand, the Jewish leaders, reject the man who is healed. They throw him out, and they reject Jesus as well. Their reason? This man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. Now we come to the end of the narrative when the Pharisees finally catch up with Jesus himself, who seemingly was waiting for them to come, almost as if to give them one more chance before blunting the antagonism that he knew would come. If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you are saying we see, and so your sin remains. As Jesus speaks to them, a long time ago, a Greek philosopher, Plato, wrote, "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." How deftly that describes the interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees. And what a lesson for us today as well. Is it possible that we have a fear of the true light of grace? A fear of the cost of conversion from selfishness to selflessness? I wonder how many people, like the Pharisees, are somehow prevented from recognizing the significance of Jesus in their lives. In this current climate of COVID-19, I wonder how many people turn away from God in disillusionment, frustration, or anger, rather than turning to the light of the world, that the works of God might today be made visible through Jesus. Jesus makes the healing of this blind man into a beautiful opportunity for others to see the work of God through him. The one who is blind sees the wonder of God's power as a personal gift and comes to faith. Others, like the Pharisees, who see the results of this personal healing, a man born blind now seeing, are not so touched with wonder and are blind to the light shining so powerfully. While we wait for an eventual COVID-19 vaccine, will you and I see it only as a work of science or as a wonderful work of God manifested through these researchers as instruments of his love? Earlier I said that Jesus included us so that the work of God might continue to be made visible. So will we be blind to the opportunities that will continue to appear before us, to love God by being an instrument of God's love to our neighbor, or see even the difficulties that we face in God calling us back to ourselves? Perhaps while staying on track this Lent, our thoughtful, random acts of Christian kindness need not be so random, but purposeful. Perhaps our acts of Christian kindness can be as simple as making a few calls, checking up on neighbors, sharing that extra roll of paper towels or toilet paper. Perhaps that act of Christian kindness might simply be staying at home to prevent the spread of this disease. We, you and I, can continue to be that light of Christ most powerfully through prayer, letting people know that we are praying for them, inviting them to join us in prayer over the phone or at a specific time, to plan, to take time, pausing from anything else and praying a decade of the Rosary. I'd like to end this rather long homily today with this thought. Think of how a single candle is so powerful in providing light in a room that is dark. How beautiful that point of light dispelling the darkness. Be that candle. Be that light of Christ. At this time when we might want to go to sleep to wake up and find that this is only a bad dream, let us remember St. Paul's words in his letter to the people of Ephesus. Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. God bless.